Letter 7. I hope I have presented enough interesting material that you have found a desire to follow along. It is my goal to get a multitude of people to follow along, and they in turn others. It is obvious that the inquiry into the origin of our universe reveals that a super-advanced technology must exist before our universe could come into being. The conclusions we have made regarding the origin of our universe are not arguable. There is just no logical, reasonable alternative, and it is very important for people to keep this in mind when contemplating our reality. It helps us to understand how things that seem mystical, magical, and impossible can actually be. Also, once one realizes that there must be an advanced technology, there are a number of required conclusions that follow. First and foremost, there must be an entity that wields the technology, therefore, a creator exists. Once that conclusion is reached, it follows that life, therefore, is also the result of the technology wielded by the creator. The last conclusion above is supported by an inquiry into the nature of life. There is just no possibility that the earliest organisms identified in the fossil record could have been the result of random events. There is no random mechanism that would produce a cell wall, the enclosed cytoplasm, and the cell nucleus from the raw elements. The reaction would have to produce the entire organism in one process, from base elements, which would all have to be present at the same time, because there are no examples of the individual parts of the organism existing independently having developed by random themselves. Also, all the conditions necessary for the reaction to proceed, for example, the proper temperature and pressure, would have to be present. And these reaction conditions would have to be maintained for an extended period of time for the reaction to produce a multitude of organisms. And since there must be a multitude of organisms produced, there must be a multitude of the reactants present. This analysis, in addition to a number of other holes in the theory of random evolution, leads one to the only logical, reasonable conclusion: life was created by the entity who wields the advanced technology. Once the two previous conclusions are realized to be the only true ones available, one must then determine what the true nature of the entity that created our reality is. There is only one representation on this planet that meets muster: the Bible. We must put our stock in the Holy Scriptures because there is no other text that contains as much verifiable knowledge, historical facts, and in-depth information on the purpose of life, as demonstrated by exhibits presented in previous letters and other articles to come. But not only does the Bible contain scientific knowledge that has been proven, but it also contains a detailed chronicle of the family of man, or one man to be precise, Adam. Yes, other religious texts promote moral virtue and have their own creation myths, but the aforementioned qualities of the Bible are what set it apart from the others. And in fact, an inquiry into the origins of peoples clearly traces certain peoples back to the names of the Bible. There is no doubt that it is a true document, for, as we will see, it conforms to the natural history of this planet much more closely than some realize. Furthermore, once you understand that there must be a super-advanced technology and one whom wields it, it naturally follows that it must be protected from falling into the wrong hands, because there are those who would use it to destroy all reality, or realities. Of this, there can be no doubt. We only need to observe those around us to understand this. In fact, this brings us to the reason why we are here, to determine which of us will be destroyed to prevent just such a scenario. To help you grasp this concept, here is a passage to study. Ezekiel 28, verses 1 through 19. The word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, 2. Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus, Thus saith the Lord God, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am a god, I sit in the seat of God, in the midst of the seas, yet thou art a man, and not God, though thou set thine heart as the heart of God. 3. Behold, thou art wiser than Daniel, there is no secret that they can hide from thee, for, with thy wisdom and with thine understanding thou hast gotten thee riches, and hast gotten gold and silver into thy treasures. 5. By thy great wisdom and by thy traffic hast thou increased thy riches, and thine heart is lifted up because of thy riches. 6. Therefore thus saith the Lord God, because thou hast set thine heart as the heart of God. 7. Behold, therefore I will bring strangers upon thee, the terrible of the nations, and they shall draw their swords against the beauty of thy wisdom, and they shall defile thy brightness. 8. They shall bring thee down to the pit, and thou shalt die the deaths of them that are slain in the midst of the seas. 9. Wilt thou yet say before him that slayeth thee, I am God? But thou shalt be a man, and no God, in the hand of him that slayeth thee. 10. Thou shalt die the deaths of the uncircumcised by the hand of strangers, for I have spoken it, saith the Lord God. 11. Moreover the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, 12. Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou sealest up the sum, full of wisdom, and perfect in beauty. 13. Thou hast been in Eden the garden of God, every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. 14. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so, thou wast upon the holy mountain of God, thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. 15. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. 16. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned, therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. 17. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty, thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground, I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. 18. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic, therefore will I bring forth a fire from the midst of thee, it shall devour thee, and I will bring thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold thee. 19. All they that know thee among the people shall be astonished at thee, thou shalt be a terror, and never shalt thou be any more. There are those who claim to be men of faith who do not really understand the message above, Russell Grigg, to name one. They claim that the subject is actually a king of Tyre, an ancient island fortress off the coast of Israel. They don't ask themselves this question, how can these verses be discussing a flesh king of Tyre when it is impossible for a king of Tyre to have walked in the garden after it was sealed off from man, as stipulated by the following? Genesis 3, verse 23, Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the garden of Eden, to till the ground from whence he was taken. 24. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life. It is obvious from these verses that the garden was sealed off from mankind after the eviction of Adam and Eve and is guarded by cherubim. There is just no possible way that they can be speaking of a flesh man, a king of Tyre. Or what about this question, how could a king of Tyre have been a covering cherub? Notice also that this one is created, not born of woman. And you must ask yourself this question also, how many kings of Tyre have been recorded in history as having spontaneously commusted? If an actual king had been brought to ashes from within in front of men, there most surely would have been some record of such a miraculous event. There are a number of lessons to be learned from the verses above. However, the one that is pertinent to this letter is that the subject of the passage considers himself like unto God, our Father. What conclusion can we draw from this fact? One conclusion is that if one were actually to become like our Father, they would, of course, have the ability to wield the super advanced technology that our Father wields. The key to identifying the subject is twofold. How many do you think have already been sentenced to perish? I hope you can answer. 1. Satan, the serpent, the dragon, the false rock. The other clue is the name used for the subject, Tyrus. This word means a rock in the Hebrew and signifies the false rock, as opposed to the true rock, Christ. That Christ is the true rock is found in the book of Romans, Romans 9, verse 33, as it is written, Behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling stone and rock of offense, and whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. Here we see that there will be a rock placed in Zion. For some, this rock will be an impediment because they have not studied to know the truth, therefore, they will be confused and whore after false messiahs. But those who know the truth will recognize that true rock, be able to identify the false rock, and will not be confused nor ashamed, for when that true rock comes, some of those who are following the false rock will indeed be ashamed. The verses above from the book of Ezekiel establish that there are those who wish to usurp the super advanced technology, call it ability if you like, and there is no doubt that some of them would not hesitate to destroy our reality. And that answers the question of why things are allowed to happen. They condemn themselves and make our Father's decision easier for him, and their actions help to alleviate the remorse that our Father may have for judging some of his children to perish. And those who suffer at their hands will receive rewards from Father, on condition, for their ordeal, even if they did not believe prior to departing